me. So I, uh, oops, um, I have my morning voice here because it's early here. So I started working on this issue almost 15 years ago. I began doing a master's thesis on street harassment in 2006 and researching it. And it was, I decided to write it because I had never heard the term street harassment, but had recently come across it. And I recognized that was something that I had experienced so many times in my life, starting when I was 5 years old, and it had really upset me and changed my life. So yeah, 15 years ago, I started down the trajectory of working to address this issue. And in 2008, that's when I started my website, Stop Street Harassment, as a website and blog. And I began tracking what was happening all over the world. And India was one of the places where a lot of activism was already happening. Egypt was another country where there were women and men who had been working on this issue for quite a while. So I ended up writing a book that came out in 2010 that looked at why street harassment is a problem and what we can do about it, and touched on why this is a global issue. Anyways, I continued to watch what was happening all around the world. I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if there was a week when we could all speak out together? And actually, I wasn't as ambitious the first time. The first time I said, what if we had a day where we could all speak out together? And with kind of just a month notice, I decided to throw something together and just put it out to the people I knew working on this issue. And in 2011, there was the first International Anti-Street Harassment Day. And one of the biggest actions was this huge march through Delhi. And there were probably at least 100 people marching. And I just was so shocked because here I was in the United States, just like dreaming up, let's have a day. And people were actually responding and doing something. And there were groups all over the world who participated. And I did a survey afterwards and asked, for feedback. And one of the main points of feedback was that people would love to have more time, more options, a whole week. So, like for example, people at universities or schools wanted to be able to do something on a weekday, or, a lot of organizations wanted to do it on weekdays. But then a lot of activists who had day jobs wanted to be able to hold a march or rally or workshop on a weekend. So that's why in 2012, it became a whole week. And so starting with 2012 through today, we've actually had 10, I guess, of the weeks and then one of the days, but I still call it 11 years because we've had 11 years of activism where we've all come together. And it has been really effective. At creating a space for people all over the world to take action. And I've never told people what to do. I just give ideas because I know the way that we respond to this issue changes and varies based on region and country and language. So some people want to hold a big rally or march through the streets. In other places, it may not be safe or it may not be ideal. And they want to do online action or hold workshops or, do self-defense classes. So it's really been inspiring to see what people do. And in recent years, there's been a lot of like chalking on the streets and putting flyers up and putting banners up to raise awareness. And of course, these last 2 years have been unusual with the COVID lockdowns. We have not really had very many offline events. Most of it has been online. So it's tweet chats, events like this one that you're attending right now. People have been really creative with using Instagram Live and Clubhouse and Facebook Live and really trying to raise awareness in the ways that we can with the tools that we have. And across the years, we usually have groups in up to 35 countries take part. And it really brings solidarity, I think, to show this is a global problem. And there are people all over the world who are speaking out at the same time together, and that we are allies in this, and that we have each other's backs, and that we know that this issue is often not talked about enough, it's not taken seriously enough, but that we each are working on it and that we are there for each other and to collaborate. And then within countries and regions, it can have a big impact. And a lot of countries will get media coverage and, lots of people paying attention to the issue. So I think it works on multi-levels, that you get the local attention and then you have the global solidarity. So thank you so much to everyone who's taking part this year, and a special thank you to Elsa and her team at Safe City for all that you've done this year to keep the week going. I do this unpaid, and so I was kind of exhausted and wanted to stop last year, but Elsa said, let's keep going. So I appreciate all that you've done to keep it going.
Thanks, Holly. And, really it is a global problem and we are here to discuss it. And I'm so glad that there are people from New York, the UK, France, lots of people from, of course, Kenya and India, because our panelists are also from Kenya and India. And We have Josephine from L'Oreal, who's in the audience, but we have Alice from Ipsos, who did the study, who's going to share in a moment. So welcome everyone. Take a moment to see who's in the chat, but also introduce yourself, because it is a global movement. We cannot solve it on our own. We need each other. I also see one of our partners at the Global Coalition Against Street Harassment, Gillian here. She's from UK. Her organization is Safe in the City. So welcome, Gillian. And maybe you'll have a chance to also weigh in on the topic. But without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guests. So we have the Honorable Esther Pissaris. She's the Member of Parliament, National Assembly, and the Women Representative at Nairobi County. Welcome, Esther. We have Kanta Singh, who's the Country Program Manager for UN Women India, and prior to that, she was at UNDP. We have Jane Anyango, my dear friend. She's the founder of Polycom Development Project in Kenya and our Safe City Kenyan partner. And we have Alice Status, who's the director at Ipsos Public Affairs, who did this amazing study for L'Oreal. So before we dive into the discussion, I'm going to turn it over to Alice to share with us some of these statistics from their latest study on street harassment. Over to you, Alice.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm going to share my screen so that you can see. Okay, is that okay? Can everyone see my screen? All right. So today I'm going to share with you a few elements of on what we did with L'Oréal Paris. It's been almost 3 years that we've been working with L'Oréal Paris on sexual harassment, because as you may know, L'Oréal Paris has chosen sexual harassment as the cause, as the issue they will try to fight against for the following years. So we've been doing different surveys with them, and the last one in 2021, at the beginning of the year, we interviewed more than 15,000 people in 15 countries, among them India, some countries in Europe, few countries in America, and we have countries in Asia as well, so a bit of countries everywhere. This survey is very interesting because it shows that sexual harassment is actually, according to the citizens of these 15 countries, the main issue, the most important issue faced by women and girls in their countries. It's mentioned by 47% of people. And right after, they mention domestic abuse, then sexual violence, and then physical violence. So you can see that in this top 4 issue, it's all related to violence against women. So this is very important. And this is one of the key figures of our project. Which is very important as well, is that this issue of sexual harassment is also the first issue mentioned by men. So even men, they recognize that sexual harassment is the main issue that women and girls have in the world. And it's the second issue mentioned by women after domestic abuse, except among women aged less than 35, who mention it as the first issue they encounter. Depending on the countries, there are of course some differences. It's the first issue in Spain, in the US, in Mexico, in Brazil, in Thailand, and in United Arab Emirates. But it's always in the top 4, top 5 of the issues in all countries we surveyed. But even if the issue, even if people are aware this is an important issue, awareness is getting better, but some very important misconceptions remain. Here you have 2 of them. 68% of the people we surveyed think that there is a fine line between flirting and sexual harassment. So that's the first misconception, which is pretty important. The second one is that more than 1% out of 2, 53% think that women are sometimes to be blamed for situations of sexual harassment due to their attitudes, behavior, or appearance. This is very important. This first figure, there's a fine line between flirting and sexual harassment, goes up to 81% in Thailand, 79% in South Africa. And just to share with you the differences between men and women on the second item, women are sometimes to be blamed for situations of sexual harassment. It's something that being shared by 50% of men, but also, and it's very important, by 50% of women. Today, 1 woman out of 2 in the world, in the countries we surveyed, think that women are sometimes responsible for the situations of sexual harassment. And this figure goes up to 81% in China, 80% in Thailand, and 78% in Poland. We measured 11 situations. We asked women whether they encounter at least once in their life these 11 situations. And in the end, it appears that 4 women out of 5 have experienced street harassment as a victim at least once in their life. That's 80%. That's a lot. Situation per situation, you can see that inappropriate and unwanted sexual looks were experienced by more than 1 woman out of 2. Same as sexually suggestive or intrusive comments about their appearance, clothing, anatomy, or looks. That concerns 1 woman out of 2, a little more than 1 woman out of 2. So that's a very important figure to keep in mind. 4 women out of 5 have experienced street harassment as victims. Which is very important to know as well, is that it's something that concerns all women, no matter their age. You can see that younger women are a little more exposed to this street harassment, that's 84, but older women up to 60 years old and more, they are still concerned by this problem in very important, it's 72%, that's a lot of women. Here you have the difference per country. You can see that in some countries, the issue of sexual harassment concern almost all women. It's more than 90% in South Africa and in Mexico. It's more than 80% in a lot of countries, in China, Russia, Canada, in Poland, Thailand, Brazil. So that's a lot. Here you have a figure that may surprise you a little. Let's say in India, we have only 43%, but the fieldwork in India was conducted differently than elsewhere. We did it face to face, and that's possible that there is a little bias because women didn't dare to tell the people who was administrating the survey that they were victim of street harassment. We also had a question this year about the situation during the pandemic. It's really important because most countries have been locked down for weeks or months, but the problem of street harassment, street sexual harassment remains very important. During the last year, during the COVID pandemic, so it's a little more than a year, 31% of women have experienced at least one situation of street harassment. So the pandemic didn't put an end, of course, to the problem. Which is very important to know as well, is that the situations of sexual harassment in public spaces have a very strong impact on women's day life and on the way they will behave. A lot of women will adapt their behavior to avoid situations of sexual harassment in public spaces. And it's something that has increased in the last 2 years, probably because of the pandemic and the streets being maybe a little with less people and shops being closed, etc. You have more than 3 women out of 4 who say that they avoid going out late at night to avoid sexual harassment in public spaces. 3 women out of 4 who say that they avoid certain places. 61% of women who try not to go out by themselves to avoid situations of sexual harassment. And 59% of women who say that they adapt their clothing or appearance to avoid this kind of issue. That is very, very important. I'll just share 2 more questions with you. This one is about about the intervention of people when they noticed a situation of sexual harassment. Only one bystander out of three intervene in the last situation of sexual harassment he or she witnessed. It means that two bystander out of three just witnessed the situation and didn't do anything. So that's very important. People mainly don't do anything when they witness situation of sexual harassment. And when we ask them why they didn't do anything in these situations of street harassment, they first say that someone else intervened, so they didn't. But the second reason, and it's really important, say that they didn't know what to do. So that's very important, and that's exactly what L'Oréal Paris is trying to do with the training they offer, the stand-up training, to give people some clues to know how to intervene when they witness situations of sexual harassment. So I'm done with this result, and I'll be glad to answer your questions if you have some. Thank you.
And I don't know if y'all noticed, but the 2 rows below that, there was this response that the victim or the target did not look that upset. And often people don't intervene because they feel that the person experiencing the harassment does not exhibit signs of distress. So why should we intervene? And that is also part of the social conditioning of women from an early age to not really speak up or ask for help or break the silence around it. So now we're going to jump into a discussion. Hold your questions, put it in the chat section so that we can curate it later. But I'm going to now, invite Kanta. Kanta, you saw the survey. Of course, India is at the bottom and it shows 43, but it's completely skewed. You and I know, because we have a culture of entitlement. I mean, just a few days ago in Delhi, a man and woman were having an argument, and then the woman got murdered in broad daylight on the street and nobody did anything. So how is it possible that we don't react and accept this kind of violence?
Thank you, Elsa, and thank you for inviting me. And Alice, this was really eye-opener to me, because in one of the audience members has written that we were hoping that India would be at the top, and that is how the situation is. It's not. We are not at 43%. Definitely, there's underreporting. There is
to add something on that point, it's very difficult for us to conduct surveys on this topic in India, because
Right.
if we conduct the survey online, we won't touch all the population, of course. We'll only get 10-15% of the population. And if we conduct face-to-face, we have this difficulty that people don't want to tell what they actually experience. So it's quite difficult.
Absolutely, and that's what I was coming to, that we from the early childhood are told that whatever happens to us, particularly women, and any harassment, any sexual violence, we are inviting it, we are responsible for it. So there's a stigma attached to women about these things. So we don't blame the other person, we blame ourselves, that probably I was standing at the wrong place, probably I was walking in the wrong direction, probably I was not wearing right clothes, probably I offended the bystander who just pinched me when I was walking through that. So that's one problem. I remember when I shifted to Delhi, so I have generally lived in a very safe, secure environment in the army, but when we were actually shifting to Delhi for a longer period, one of the things that I was told by some of the other officers' wives was that I should always walk in the wrong direction. So I should not go with the flow of the traffic. I should start walking in the wrong direction so that I can see who is coming from the other side, who can hurt me. That was really strange. Also, what I found very peculiar to Delhi was that you can't walk in Delhi. You can take a rickshaw, you can take an auto, you can take a bus, do anything, but don't walk. Because every person who's passing through that road will stop and ask you, I want a lift. It's very strange, which I never experienced in many other cities in India, but Delhi has a very, and it still is there. If you go to areas, Elsa, which are, say, the colleges where girls' colleges are, you will find 50-year-old uncles standing there and asking girls if they could give them a lift back home. I don't know how do they have the courage, how do they have this audacity to speak to these 20-year-olds and offer them lifts.
Kanta,
And
I also had one observation, because whilst Alice said that this survey in India was done face to face, and not many people want to say it face to face. I also feel there's lack of understanding of what actually constitutes sexual harassment.
Right.
So when you use the word sexual harassment in India, we call it eve teasing. And that in itself is problematic because you trivialize and normalize, a whole range of inappropriate and under Indian law, actually criminal behavior. But there's, people don't understand the definition of street harassment or sexual harassment, and therefore their understanding of there's no vocabulary to really give to their experience. So when they're taking a survey, unless they're explained all those things, maybe you might not also get the right response, right?
Absolutely. And also if this happens to one girl, Elsa, 5 or 10 other girls are stopped from either going to school or going wherever they want to go. It's a very difficult situation. So girls also don't want to share it with parents. Otherwise, they will be stopped from going to school. Otherwise, they'll be stopped from going to work. I was 14 years old when we traveled to Kerala. And that was my first brush with street harassment. I remember it was a small town, North Parur. We were staying in smaller schools, and also I used to play sports. So, and these boys in the morning will follow us to the stadium every morning, and they'll keep whistling because we used to wear short skirts and shorts. So they'll keep whistling behind us. We'll go and drop us there. Evening, when we used to come back to wherever we are staying, they will come back, and in groups. I had never felt that kind of organized crime anywhere till then, because we thought we were safe. It wasn't safe anymore. On the trains when we used to travel, and now when you start talking about it, many incidents come to your head when we felt, unsafe, but could never articulate because didn't know who to tell. And I always wonder how people in India at least talk about all women are bad drivers and say all men are not harassing. That's true, but if all men are not harassing, why don't they speak up when they see other men doing it to women? Yeah, if you are not one of them, then please be on our side and speak. And I fully understand not men are wife beaters, they're not domestic violence abusers, they're not harassing women, but then please get up and speak, support us. This is not right. And I really feel sorry for young women, because if my daughter walks with me on the street, see, people look at her, people have the license to look at her from top to bottom. If I am alone, I'm looked at the same way by a 20-year-old man. What is happening here? Seriously, it's a trauma that cannot be explained through surveys.
I'm going to interrupt you here, but I think Holly at one point when she did come to Delhi, she took a walk out from the conference that we were attending, and when she came back like half an hour later, she was like, I can't deal with this. Maybe Holly, later you can explain to us what happened. But I want to bring in Esther here. Esther, you're a lawmaker, and how can governments take charge of this situation? They are responsible in some way in creating this enabling environment. So can you share with us, how can people like you, representatives of the people who are in parliament, how can you push for reform? You're on mute.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for inviting me to be a panelist. As I was introduced, I'm a member of parliament in Kenya, and I represent the county of Nairobi. It's an affirmative action seat for women to compete against women so we can get more women into parliament. Alice, I want to say thank you very much to L'Oreal and yourself and the entire team for coming up with this study on street harassment. I mean, we've given a lot of focus on sexual harassment, but street harassment is different. It's about us not accepting diverse communities and understanding that we can't all be together. We should be more accommodating. And I think when I think before I became a parliamentarian, I somehow supported a movement called My Dress, My Choice. My Dress, My Choice was a movement in Kenya. And by the way, Alice, I really have a bone to pick with you. I mean, South Africa, I'm glad you did a study in South Africa, and I know they have a lot of problems in terms of sexual offenses as well as street harassment, but I really wish that you could have done something in Kenya as well. So on my Twitter handle, where I have over 600,000 people, I'll try and ask some of these questions and get the conversation live today and see how we can get this conversation as it's happening on this panel, on this platform, to also go into the Kenyan discussion. I mean, we're on lockdown in quite a few counties because of Corona, but it'll be something that we should think about. But when we did My Dress, My Choice, it was just because a man felt that a woman was indecently dressed. So he decides, because she's indecently dressed, to strip her. So what happened when he stripped her of all her clothing? I mean, I wondered what was the decency in what they did to her. But what we've noticed in this era of social media right now, what we need is a lot of people sensitized and to stand up and help victims of street harassment. But everybody wants to take out their smartphone and capture the event, you know? And when I hear what you said about what happened in Delhi, I mean, a woman was killed in broad daylight. I ask myself, what is happening to humanity? What is happening to our society? When a woman walks down the street and a man half her age, you know, like Countess saying that the same way they would look at her daughter, they would look at her, a 20-year-old boy, he's young enough to be your son, and then he's not only whistling at you, he's looking at you in a suggestive way or making comments. I think we have to, this is a global problem. And I think what we have to do in Kenya is, first of all, sensitize people to make them aware of what is going on. We did that with My Dress, My Choice. The government stepped up. The government made arrests, you know, because it moved from dress codes being, you know, men thinking that they had a say on how we dress. Then it moved to men raping women in buses, and the government really stepped up. So I'm really proud we took action and there was sentence. But now we need to make sure that we have a law. And I think street harassment, the more I think about it, shouldn't be pegged as one item in a sexual offences law. It's the law itself. So I think with Jane Onyango and the Kenyans that are on the platform today, we, you know, it's an area that we have to really look at. How can we make a law that make people, women, children, men safe, you know? I was also looking at the case that she had in India, where the courts ruled that the little girl lured into the house, right? Her breast was not groping. You know, they said that, you know, he needed to have gone into her blouse, and yet he took this little young girl, lured her because of saying, "I'm going to give you guava," and then takes her into the room, locks her up into the room. The mother found her there. He touched her breast, but then now they've reduced the sentence, saying it wasn't groping because the law doesn't provide for it. So when our laws don't provide for things, what we need is quick action in terms of making the law work, because we don't want, you know, judges can't work outside of the law. So again, as legislators, I think we have to pay attention to these various areas that men find loopholes to abuse not only women, but also children. We also have something in East Africa where albinos were under attack. You know, they were being, they're diverse in terms of race and color. And so what happened is albinos were being, you know, when you walk around, because they were looking for their body parts to do witchcraft to make people rich, there was a perception. And there was a time that they were being killed and hunted down and, you know, treated like animals, or even worse than animals. And, you know, I had an albino friend, and she was telling me, "Esther, you don't know how hard it is. I walk in fear. I mean, when somebody's behind me, I think, is this person who's walking behind me going to capture me? Is he going to take me and then sell me to the neighboring country so that I could be used for witchcraft?" And, you know, they do this thing. When they see her, they whistle and they go, "Oh, money, you know, you're money, you're something that can enrich me." So we do have a problem with street harassment. And that's why, even though I'm out of my country right now, I'm actually in Ahmedabad, India. I decided that this is something that I have to participate in, because it's a discussion that I can't thank L'Oreal enough. And I hope that we can do more studies within our region in East Africa. So thank you.
Thanks, Esther. And I did not know that you were in Ahmedabad. So welcome to India, and please stay safe. Right now, COVID-19 is raging like crazy in all parts of India. And we hope you stay healthy. And I do want to acknowledge that Esther, Jane, and myself are all from Vital Voices, an organization that is really supportive of all women leaders around the world, especially those working to end all forms of violence against women. And thank you, Esther, for being so supportive of this cause, because I know Jane, who's my partner at Safe City in Kenya, she has really been talking so highly about the work you've been doing. And I would like to ask Jane to share a little bit about your work on the ground, and also the importance of data, because this kind of, like the survey that L'Oreal and Ipsos have put out is so revealing. But on a day-to-day basis, they did say 4 out of women experience sexual harassment, but we don't get to hear these stories, and we don't collect the data. They don't get recorded in any official channel, and thereby it makes the issue invisible. So share with us some of the amazing work you've been doing, the talking boxes, and how in a way we could help you make it more visible through Safe City as well. Over to you, Jane.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Elsa, for this opportunity. Thank you, Mheshimiwa Esther, for joining this call, and everyone. And thank you, Alice, for the beautiful presentation that you just shared. So as Elsa has mentioned, is that I live and work in a slum settlement in Kenya called Kibera. When I met Elsa, I was already doing crowd data sourcing through a platform we call the Talking Boxes. But we didn't know what to do with the data that we were collecting. So we just collect, and then we go and talk to the girls about this. And then, so when I met Elsa, I was able to learn how to come up with this graphical representation of different forms of sexual harassment. And we were able to just take this campaign forward and just get everybody talking. And I always say that when we take the harassment line, then we are all either survivors or perpetrators, because we have been harassed in one way or another. People comment on how we dressed, how we look, and things like that. And for the young girls we work with, it's very tough and very complicated when people start commenting on their breasts, on their butt, and things like that. It is really frustrating, but we didn't know that it's something that we would just put together and get a good conversation out of. So when we started presenting these different forms of sexual harassment, we got the girls together and started asking them, like, have you experienced this? Have you experienced this? And it's very interesting how the girls were able to come out and tell us the different forms of violence, the sexual harassment that they face every day. We have this group of girls that told us, you know what, we don't take this particular route from school going home, because we have these young people who are sitting there, and when we pass, they try to touch us, they try to kiss us by force, they comment on how big our breasts are, they just give these very weird comments that we don't know what to do about. Or someone can pretend that they are actually the way men stand and just pass urine everywhere on the streets. So it's like they pretend to be urinating, but in true sense, they're just trying to expose their bodies to these young girls. So we noticed that this is a big problem in our community, and it's happening everywhere. The big girls will tell us about this big stage in town, we call it Kencom, where in the evening we have men who hide behind the stage, and when big girls, they expose their manhood to them. And you know, when we just picked it and started talking to everybody about it, then people were like, okay, then this is something we should be really talking about and shouting about. In our community, you can't find that, you know, we have so many young people always idling around. And when a young girl is passing, or when a woman is passing, there are all these comments, look at you, you are right, you look beautiful. But it has been socially accepted because people don't say anything about it. It is normal. like many people react, like if I'm working with my daughter and someone comments on my daughter, then I feel offended and I'm able to talk. But if they're talking about somebody else, then many people would just pass. They'd be like, you know, what is the big deal? Just commenting. And it's very hard even to report sexual harassment because you go to the police station and you try to say, and they're like, you know, how did it harm you? That was just a comment. You know, they just touch you, they didn't do anything. So at the end of the day, many people don't report, people don't take any action, and it has been as rampant as possible because many people don't talk. I'm happy that recently we were able to collect a lot of data on sexual harassment, and we came with this evidence report. And I'm very grateful to Honorable Pasaris, who is with us, that she was able to launch this report for us. And we were the lawyers who were in the room actually confirmed that this report is very, very important because when we are talking about sexual harassment in Kenyan law, then we're only looking at sexual harassment within the formal setup. We are not looking at sexual harassment in the street or maybe against these young kids who are walking everywhere in their communities. So the report is very, very important because it may just influence how Kenyans are going to define sexual harassment in our law. And in 2016, we have this bill that was shot down in Parliament because they didn't really understand what sexual harassment is. They really didn't understand. You look at the arguments, you try to read whatever the outcome of the bill that was shot down, then they didn't really understand what sexual harassment is. They didn't understand that it's something that is happening within our homes, everywhere. You know, we have these girls who are reporting to us that, you know what, my dad takes a lot of time watching television, and after people are asleep, I find him coming into my room and trying to touch my private part. We have girls who are reporting that, you know what, anytime I'm mopping the house, then I find someone, I find my father standing behind me, and I feel very uncomfortable. So you listen to all these stories, then we're like, we should take action. We should let everybody know that it is wrong. When you're feeling uncomfortable, then it is wrong. When someone is looking at you, staring at you, and you're not feeling comfortable, it is wrong. We should speak about it. So I'm happy that we are having this session here today. I'm happy that we are having everybody who have been able to attend to join the meeting. I'm happy that we're having Kenyans here today. Let's take this up very seriously. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be part of this conversation.
Okay, so now I'm going to pin all our guests on one screen so that we can see everyone and of course myself as well. So Holly, you know, we've spoken about the problem and I think we constantly talk about the problem is enough. And it sometimes is very depressing as well. And since you've been doing this for 11 years, this is the 11th year of Anti-Street Harassment Week. Do you have any message of hope for us?
Yeah, I think, first of all, just that, you know, people continue to want to speak about this issue and we engage more and more new people every year is important because we have to, you know, keep the conversation going. And, you know, over the years, we've seen a lot more government agencies get involved, UN, you know, big organizations like Plan International, agencies that have more reach and resources. And when they take on this issue and address it within their organizations, that's really powerful. I would love to see more men's organizations, you know, be involved. I think a lot of groups that focus on women are the ones who are still involved. And, you know, we're not going to change this problem until we have more men taking leadership roles and actually talking to other men, since studies show that men are the main harassers of people of all genders, because men experience street harassment as well. So I, you know, that's something I want to see more of is men taking leadership role. But one last thing I want to mention is that looking at, you know, the study that Alice laid out, I've done a couple of studies on street harassment in the United States, and that was one of the countries studied this year, and it showed that 80% of women had experienced street harassment. Well, prior studies that I had done showed 65%, and then it was, I forget the second one, it was around 70%. And so to me, that's actually encouraging that the numbers are going up, because that means, like you were talking about earlier, Elsa, more people are aware of what this issue is. Because if you don't know what street harassment is, you're not going to say, yes, I've experienced it. So I think that what we're seeing is more awareness. And what I see a long view for this issue. It's going to take decades, if not centuries, to really change this. And the first step is awareness. And so if we're seeing an increase in awareness, we're seeing an increase of people knowing what street harassment is and knowing that it's not okay. Well, that's the first step. And I think we are making progress there.
Would you like to ask any of our panelists a question, Holly?
I guess what do you think, sorry, I'm trying to formulate my thought here. Is it useful to have global collaboration as you're doing your local work? Like what, I don't know if anyone chimes in, like what can we do as a global collective? How can we, from your point of view in your country, what can the global community do to help strengthen what you're doing locally? If that makes sense.
If I can come in, Holly.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it is critical. And in fact, this is the first time I'm being part of an event where we are talking globally about an issue which exists and we are uncomfortable talking about it. So that's very, very critical, not only to bring the issue where it belongs, where, when people start thinking about it, talking about it and doing something about it. So yes, having a global coalition is very important. It also brings data, like what Alice did. Data is very, very important. Third thing that I was also thinking, Elsa, is that technology is critical. If there are people not willing to talk about it, we can have anonymous surveys. We can have people, girls talk, particularly young women who have phones in their hands can definitely be part of some survey. So if they open Google and if Google has a tool through which they can ask, hey, have you ever faced harassment on the street? And if it's just that simple, the global data is being collected somewhere.
We have the tool, it's Safe City, it's anonymous, completely anonymous, no email, no IP address. You only have to answer your gender, age, what happened to you, where did it happen, day and time of day, because the patterns matter. In our opinion, the patterns and the location and the type of crime matters. And all crime has a pattern. So the tool exists. So
no, Elsa, my only challenge is that before I started knowing you, I didn't know about what you're doing. Even and a person like me who's been working with women all through my official life or professional life, I didn't know about what you are doing. It's important, and Google everybody opens, or Facebook everybody opens. It becomes so much easier if you can tie up with them and put that survey there. That is what I'm saying. So awareness is very important. Collectivization is very important. Lobbying is very important. When we have a member parliament with us, and she knows the importance of involving more people, but last, and again, going back to what Holly was saying, involving men. Because they are the ones who are creating problems for us, and they have to accept it and have to do something about it. So, and particularly the men who are not involved in this. So they have to start speaking against it. And I think and technology, of course. That's all from me.
Yes, and we have lots of people from MAVA, Men Against Violence, and they do amazing job. But yeah, we have to spread it to men who are not already converted. Esther, how can you answer the same question and also think about now that we are still in COVID and we are in the second, third phase of lockdown, but as we open up, how do we build back better and safer?
What I can say is, if we look at, first of all, I mean, on this platform right now, we've merged 3-4 countries, okay? But if you look at the world today, I mean, we are all connected. The issues in Kenya are the same issues in South Africa, in Australia. I mean, the pandemic showed us that we all face the same issues. So we're interconnected somehow. And I also think in terms of solutions, we're interdependent. We have, no one country can have the solutions to its problems on its own. So the sooner we start recognizing that right now we're having this discussion because we've somehow gotten linked together. But imagine the talking boxes of Jane Onyango became a point where a study was put together, right? And a report format was put that could actually help give Parliament the evidence and that they needed to change the law. So just by having a conversation about, here in a slum in Kenya, we have talking boxes to understand it became a source of data, right? And it could teach so many other people in so many other countries. So I feel that we have to expand the people that we bring on board. And I agree that the social media platforms can bring more people on board. This is not a conversation of 5 or 6 organizations. L'Oreal might be in quite a number of countries. That footprint on its own with this conversation go to so many other countries. Okay, they probably, I don't know what was the criteria when they decided which countries to go for the study, but come to think of it, we've got L'Oreal products in Kenya. So the same way they're concerned about how does street harassment get tackled? How do we get the private sector organizations to understand what street harassment is, how to protect, how to talk about it, how to empower? Because vulnerability is what leads to street harassment. I mean, there is an interconnection between, a thin line between vulnerability and street harassment. You're vulnerable, and that's why you're harassed. So and there's no country, not even the USA, where people are not vulnerable. It's not about economic status of a country. It's not about religion. It's not about developed or undeveloped. Everybody is vulnerable at one point or another, depending on where you are. So I feel that this is a conversation that is not contained in any border. It's for the entire globe. And the social media platform, as Kanta said, has no borders. You know, what happens, in America, Kenya knows within seconds from the social media. In fact, I think Kenyans are so active on social media that anything that happens anywhere in the world, Black Lives Matter, Asian Lives Matter, Kenyans are the ones who are probably giving the most, condemnation out. I mean, we're very active on social media. So let us not just be there posting and retweeting, but also owning the conversation and saying, this is the problem. How can we be part of the solution? And I feel that this is a conversation that cuts across everyone.
Thank you, Esther. And I know Jane has her hand up. So Jane, what you would like to add to the topic?
Thanks so much, Elsa, and everyone who have spoken. What I can say is that we have all these platforms right now. Just the other day, we were having this generational equality forum, Mexico forum. So how well can we use such platforms? Because I know many things we are doing digitally right now. Is it possible to have these side events where we are specifically talking about sexual harassment? Or is it possible for us to have conversations within the mainstream can I say conversations? Because this is a problem that is affecting everybody. It's affecting everybody, and we can no longer take it for granted. I know we have used the World Urban Campaign platform so many times, and even right now we are going to have another, we call it Urban Thinkers Campus, and we've always chosen the aspect or the principle of safety. That is, the city we need is safe, and always presented the safe city model as an innovation that can be used to get as much data as possible on sexual harassment. So let's put our heads together, let's contribute to these platforms, and let's get data, let's get evidence to show that it is actually happening. It is really happening, and it can happen to anyone, anywhere. So why should we wait for it to continue happening if we can do something about it? It is better for us to say that this is where we are right now. These are the steps we have been able to make, and these are the results we've been able to see. Like in Kibera, I can proudly say that we had a meeting with different stakeholders, and we presented to them these areas where sexual harassment are very rampant. And they were really, it was very interesting getting people to acknowledge, yes, we have young boys sitting there. Yes, we see them every day, but we've never known that they have been harassing the schoolgirls. So let's have them as our ambassadors talking about sexual harassment. So whichever way, in whichever small way we can take action, let's do it. And in the meantime, let's get as much data as possible so that we have evidence to show that it's really happening. Join global conversations. Thank you.
Elsa said I could ask a question. Alice, you all have done 3 surveys now, global surveys, which is wonderful. It's so important to have that data. I know that partnering with L'Oreal Paris, part of the point is to show why the bystander intervention is important. But are there other goals for what you all hope the research will do, and kind of like what your future plans are?
Of course, there's many goals for about this this survey, and I just wanted to add something about awareness. In the survey we conducted in 2019, we asked two questions. First, we asked women, have you ever experienced any situations of sexual harassment in your life? Yes, no. Okay, and then we ask another question where we detail 11 situations of sexual harassment, from comments and someone is insisting to get a date, to somebody hanging around you, somebody showing you parts of his body, somebody touching you. So 11 situations. And then we get another figures, and between those two figures, spontaneous and assisted, there was something like 20 points difference. So it means that there's a lot of women who've been victim of sexual harassment, but don't even know that it could be called sexual harassment, that it is street harassment. They think, okay, it was only comments or jokes or someone, hanging around me, but they don't know it's sexual harassment. So that was something very important we got from the very first survey we conducted with L'Oreal in 2019, and I just wanted to add something about that. Then we conducted two international survey, one in 2019, one in 2021, and we conducted ad hoc specific market surveys in 6 countries, and some countries are joining on L'Oreal's side, and they want to have data. So we are raised in these countries. We are doing it in Japan now. We'll be doing it again in China. There's a lot of countries joining month after month, and that's pretty interesting.
Thanks, Alice. I know Divyanshu had a question. Divyanshu, would you like to ask? And please specify if it's for a particular panelist. Okay, you said you've already asked it.
Elsa, I need to drop off, but before I go, I just wanted to make another point, which is that it's not a very innocent touch or very innocent thing that happened to a girl once. One, the trauma stage. It also becomes a trust issue for a woman throughout her life, whether she trusts men or not. And thirdly, it has deep impact on her public life in the later years, whether it is economic life, whether it is education or her political career. And we know how things happen in politics across the globe, how women political leaders are being targeted through cyber tools. It really becomes a habit for people who are doing it, and it becomes a habit for us to keep taking it. So what you people are doing is really amazing. We should not ignore the cyber crimes that are happening against women, particularly to make women keep quiet, and women in public life. It is to discourage them to stay out of public life. But the time has come when women leaders have to take charge. Number one, they have to start speaking, because if we don't do it now, we will fail our daughters. We need to start talking about these issues right now. Thank you. And I'm sorry, I need to go to another meeting. Thank you all very much for inviting me. Thank you.
Thanks. So Fabrice, no, the L'Oreal survey is not on Safe City. It's a survey. It's research that Ipsos Public Affairs did. And I think Alice has already put the link in the chat. And I do want to also acknowledge that Jane, she's the innovator of the talking boxes. And if someone's wondering that what about communities where they don't have access to technology, which is again, something that women face, where in low-income communities, both in urban areas as well as rural areas, they may not have internet connectivity or access to a device. We have promoted the talking boxes. So that's how this collaboration works, when you exchange ideas and exchange strategies on how to deal and solve the problem. So I just wanted to put that out there. And Esther, do you want to share anything? Because I know you wanted to say something earlier. So
Yeah.
please go ahead.
You know, we talked about vulnerability, okay? And the fact that it's that in our diversity, the level at which we accept our diversity will determine the level of which we face street harassment. Because you see, I'm looking at Kenya, for instance. I support the LGBTQI. Why? Because I mean they're diverse in their sexuality, and by not accepting them, of course, then I will be open to the street harassment that they will have to endure because they're a community that you feel you don't accept their diversity. So I keep thinking that when we had the Kenyan post-election violence, we had tribe rising against another tribe. And at one point, it was because we didn't accept each other's cultures, each other's traditions, each other's diversity. We didn't accept the fact that this community doesn't circumcise and this community circumcises. And then it went beyond street harassment. So if we don't arrest it at this level of street harassment, then it can become something even more brutal, more lethal, more violent. You know, and I look at India, and I think the more strict, you know, I was talking to a Swami that I met here, and he was telling me that, you know, the more strict you become with your laws, the more the criminals, the rapists are making sure that they're getting even more violent. Before they would rape, but now they know that if they get caught, the laws are so strict. So they literally try and eliminate and kill. You know, they're getting more brutal. So, you know, I'm trying to say that what we need to understand as citizens of the world is that saving anyone anywhere is saving yourselves everywhere. Because at the end of the day, it's not you today that's being street harassed, it's someone else. But if we are indifferent, then tomorrow it will be us. So it's almost like we have a moral obligation to do something about this, arrest it at its early, you know, at the stage that it is. We might think it's early stages right now because we're having the conversation right now, but there could be girls out there who've committed suicide because they faced street harassment and they had nowhere to go and say, oh, by the way, I live in fear. When I walk down the streets, I'm scared because my girlfriend was gang raped on the same street, and yet that's the only way for me to get home. So I feel that this is about restoring humanity and the values that we seem to be losing so fast. And social media, it might not be the street, but it is the street as far as I'm concerned in terms of harassment as well. So, you know, we call it street harassment thinking it's just on the streets, public spaces, but it happens also on social media where people, you know, I mean, just sending you a picture of a nude picture of me, I mean, and saying, oh, do you want this? I mean, that's harassment. It can have traumatic effects on a person. So there is an urgent need to really address this. And I hope that with Jane and all the people of like minds will be able to do something in Kenya that will impact not just Kenya, but the region and of course the world. Because the talking boxes, I mean, I think Jane has come onto something that gives you an opportunity to collect data from children who don't know how to articulate and express what they're enduring in their houses. And that made a lot of things come out in the open about the levels of which we have sexual offenses in our country and to our most vulnerable children.
Thank you for bringing that up, Esther. You know, we tend to segregate spaces by saying that, oh, this happened in public, this happened in private, this happened on the virtual space. But actually, they are all interconnected because our biases, our harmful socio-cultural norms traverse all these spaces and you know, kind of impact us. I wanted to bring in Carmini. Carmini is a student in the UK who worked with us on you know, engaging men and boys. So we spoke about the need for more men and boys to be part of the conversation. Carmini, can you very briefly share your research and what did you find surprising when you did these workshops in colleges in Delhi with hundreds of boys and young men?
Hi everyone. Firstly, thank you for such an amazing panel. I'm so glad I joined. It's been super insightful, and thank you, Elsa, for for giving me this chance to kind of talk about my research. I would also end it with a question to the panelists I was really wanting to ask. So, so as Elsa mentioned, we collaborated with Safe City, and what we did was we provided sexual harassment awareness trainings to men in colleges here in Delhi. And the main components of that training was, the general training that, that is a common component of the sexual harassment awareness trainings, which is talking about laws, talking about principles to detect sexual harassment. You will find it in, in at least in Safe City's standardized awareness session. But also, we worked actively with Safe City to engage men in these trainings. And what we did was we also created a component which was an empathy building component with these men, where we discussed anonymized sexual harassment narratives that came from women in their peer groups in those same colleges, and the trainers, Safe City trainers, talked to the men in those trainings. And what we find after these trainings, about 3 months after these trainings, is that extreme forms of sexual harassment as committed by these men towards women in their classes, that is their peer groups, goes down significantly. And it seems that one of the major channels, and that was pointed out by one of the panelists as well, is that these men kind of now fear that their peers, especially their male peers, are going to now intervene if they sexually harass another woman in their class. And it seems, that this kind of male network or male group, right? This, I don't know how to say this, but this male norm seems to be quite an important mechanism to help deter sexual harassment with these men. Now, this was, however, so that's like the summary of my research. But one of the main things I still wanted to talk about is that, how feasible do you think that an awareness training like this could be, on a much larger scale for educational institutions, and to engage policymakers and, and governments and lawmakers to kind of scale up these kind of trainings? Do you think that, it's something that, that lawmakers could be approached with? Have you seen that they are interested in doing anything like that? And also your general comments on what other ways do you think that men can be engaged in this discussion?
Thanks, Carmony. Holly, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We need to have.
And here, maybe you can also address the question in the chat where they are talking about institutionalized street harassment and how, you can engage institutions. And I know you did work with the Washington Metro.
Yeah. Yeah, I think absolutely. Thank you for your research. Men look to other men, they listen to other men. And so I think we have to lean on our male allies as much as we're able to, because they, a lot of men will listen to men more than they'll listen to women. So we, as women who are on here, may be able to chat all we want with a group of men, and they may not listen as well as if a man came up and talked to them. And that's a reality that I've come to accept and just try to work around and deal with. So the more we can engage men, the more we can, try to end this problem. Yeah, I responded in the chat briefly about the problem of harassers and just desensitization within police forces. That is a huge problem. And I know in the US in particular, a lot of people do not see the police as a solution or someone to go to, particularly in communities of color, for LGBTQ individuals, for sex workers, for persons who are here, who are immigrants, who are not here with legal documentation. It can be really scary. And a lot of women of all backgrounds don't see the police as a safe place. So if we want that to be an answer, police really need to change a lot. And then as far as public transit, I do see a lot of public transit agencies around the world taking on this issue. What I talk about though is that even if they're trying to address it, I mean, until street harassment ends, generally we can't put the onus just on transit agencies. Like, as hard as they're working, if it's still going on everywhere else, like they're not going to be able to solve it by themselves, but they can be great allies. And yeah, since 2012, I've worked with the Washington, DC Transit Agency, and they've done a number of things. They've trained all their staff. They've done, and the trainings for the staff focus on stories of people who had faced harassment on the system to humanize it. So people agreed to do video recordings, and that was part of the training, so that the staff actually heard stories from people who had experienced the harassment. They've had awareness days. We do PSA campaigns every year. We do flyering during Anti-Street Harassment Week pre-COVID. We would have a day where we stood at stations and handed out information. People can report it, and they work to look for trends to see if there's, harassment at certain stations at certain times of day that they can target in on and address. But even still, a lot of people don't feel comfortable reporting it. So it's a very underreported issue, even as the transit agency is trying to encourage people to report it so they know what's happening and can track it. So I think until people do feel safe and feel like the police and transit agencies are their allies, they're not going to report it, and it'll be harder to address. But yeah, again, generally, I think, this issue is a manifestation of the inequalities that exist in our society: sexism, homophobia, racism, and so forth. And unless those issues go away, street harassment's not going to go away. So any efforts we support, to address a broader issue like sexism will ultimately help stop street harassment too.
Thanks, Holly. Esther, do you have any points to add?
Yeah, I think when I look at street harassment and I look at sexual harassment, street harassment can lead to sexual harassment, but you can have street harassment without the sexual violence. You know what I mean? So, but it's there's that emotive damage that comes to a human being. I mean, I'm just thinking, we've done a lot of focus on sexual gender-based violence, but this conversation on street harassment is everybody thinks that it's unless the victim has been raped or sodomized or battered, everything else doesn't matter. Like, if you look at domestic violence, before you actually get a man to hit his wife and land her in hospital or chop off her hands, as we had in Kenya in one domestic violence incident, there is a lot of emotional and mental torture and violence. What do you call that? So I feel that as we try and address both, they're both equally damaging to the survivor of such abuse, whether it's street harassment or SGBV. So I feel that we should try and ensure that each one is given the dominance that it deserves, because both, especially for me, the street harassment happens to people who are very, very vulnerable. Now, in Kenya, for instance, we're coming up with containers in the police stations, and with a fund that I have called the National Affirmative Action Fund. And the idea of putting these containers in the police station is because when somebody has gone through a traumatic experience of rape or defilement, when they end up in the police station, there is no space for them. And some of them end up being thrown into the cells, because if you're brought in on a Friday and you're going to be taken to court on a Monday because you've been defiled and you can't go back, you were defiled by your father, you can't be taken home. So the police, child department comes in and puts you in the police. Where are you going to sleep? You're going to sleep in the cells. So we're trying to put these containers. So there are little steps that we can talk and share with each other about what we're doing to counter certain problems. But having the gender-based violence desk in every police station has to have questions that also deal with street harassment, not just the 11 questions that were posed by Alice in her study are so crucial to actually highlighting what exactly is street harassment? And I think those could form questions, but then if they are not entrenched in the law in terms of being offenses, then they will not serve any purpose in terms of being questions. So we have to make sure that those questions that Alice has put together, the 11 questions that she asked as she was going out to get her data on street harassment, are also very, very important questions to try and entrench in the law. As we start collecting data of what is the extent of street harassment in our own country. So for me, this conversation is timely, especially we've seen during this pandemic period, we've seen heightened mental illnesses, heightened domestic violence, heightened defilement, early teenage pregnancies from defilement, from rape. So what is happening in that space of sexual harassment where nobody is, street harassment, where nobody is collecting the data? What is happening? You know, when you've got idle youth, now nobody's employed, the unemployment rate has gone up, there's a lot more idlers on the street. So what is happening to the girl who's trying to get home, or the girl who's playing in the neighborhood? You know, when you have people through this pandemic who are frustrated, depressed, you know, so we're dealing with a lot of things. And I feel that as we try to decriminalize, suicide, or we try to decriminalize, drug users, because we're trying to look at harm reduction. There's going to come a point when we're looking at a pandemic and we're gonna say, okay, you know what? It was a pandemic. They were going through this mental state. They were depressed. They were idle. So there's going to be so many thin lines that are going to have to cross. And I think every country needs to really combat completely, because we've got the sexual violence, we've got the domestic violence, we've got the verbal violence, the assault. Now, how do we make sure that street harassment gets in there and protects the women, the men, the children?
Thank you, Esther. Alice, do you have any closing comments?
I just wanted to add something, on the definition of sexual harassment that we've used. When we wrote this list of items, 11 items, 11 situations which were considered for us as sexual street harassment, we did it from different definitions of sexual and street harassment from the UN, from Europe, etc. But we also worked with an American researcher who's specialist on the topic. Her name is Beth Livingstone, and it was very, very challenging to work on this definition and on this list of 11 items, because it was the basis of our survey. There's a very important challenge about the definition of what sexual street harassment is.
Thank you, Alice. And Jane, final question to you. Can you share who else needs to be brought into the room? Because I know you have brought in religious leaders, community elders to talk about sexual harassment to men and boys, and that has been effective. Can you share with us some of these examples?
Yeah, thanks so much, Elsa. So far, I can say that as an organization, we have been able to engage other civil society organizations. We have been able to engage the community going down, and we have been able to engage other organizations going up. That is the bigger organizations, the legislator, like Mweshimiwa, who is here with us. We have been able to highlight our work through the VNR. So so far, it is just about consolidating these efforts and getting, just building the momentum, because we have done our best to bring everybody on board. We are a community-based organization, but we have managed to organize within our community. We have tried within the county. We do our work nationally when we are doing the things like the Urban Thinkers Campus. And globally, we have also been lucky to engage through the VNR and other platforms like the World Urban Forum and CSW. So if anybody is still left behind, you are just behind, join the wagon, let's work together. Thank you.
Great. So we can go on and on talking about this important topic, but I hope, we've given you some thought to think about. We are still in the Anti-Street Harassment Week, which continues till Saturday, 17th of April. We have one panel with young people from MAVA joining us on Saturday evening at the same time. So do join us then. And I'd like to end by thanking our panelists and speakers, Kanta Singh, Honorable Esther Pisaris, Alice for that amazing survey, Josephine from L'Oreal for putting us in touch with Alice, Holly Curl, who is the force behind this movement, and Jane Anyango, my dear friend from Kenya. Thank you everyone for joining and for your comments in the chat. I know Holly has to leave, but I'm going to stick around for a few more minutes. So if you want to chat, I'm going to just keep it open. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Take care.